In this episode, we'll explore one of the most misunderstood aspects of RV inspections, the difference between finding fault and identifying risk, and why that distinction changes how reports should be interpreted. This video is valuable for RV buyers, RV sales professionals, dealership management, RV inspectors, and anyone involved in RV sales or buying transactions. One of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding RV inspections comes down to a single assumption: that inspections exist to determine what is wrong. At first glance, that may sound reasonable, but that is not actually the purpose of a professional inspection. Professional RV inspections are not designed to determine fault. They are designed to identify risk. And that distinction changes everything, because fault and risk are not the same thing. Fault suggests blame. It implies that something failed because someone did something wrong or failed to do something they should have done. Risk is different. Risk simply means a condition exists that may require attention, monitoring, maintenance, or further evaluation. It does not automatically mean someone is responsible, and it does not automatically mean something is actively failing. That is why so many inspection findings are misunderstood. A buyer may see a condition documented and assume it means the RV has a serious defect. A dealership may see the same finding and feel like it is being treated as a criticism. But in many cases, the inspector is simply doing what professional inspections are designed to do: documenting a condition that may carry risk, whether now or later. And once you understand that difference between identifying fault and identifying risk, inspection findings begin to make much more sense. Because the goal is not to assign blame. The goal is to provide clarity about what is present, what may matter, and what the buyer should understand before moving forward. When inspections are framed as fault-finding exercises, emotions tend to rise very quickly, because fault implies something very specific. Fault implies blame. It implies responsibility. It suggests that someone made a mistake, overlooked something, or did something wrong. And once inspection findings start being interpreted through that lens, almost every observation can begin to feel accusatory. A documented condition no longer feels like information, it starts to feel like criticism. And that shift changes the emotional tone of the entire transaction. Buyers may feel alarmed, as if every finding means something serious has gone wrong. Dealerships may feel defensive, as if routine conditions are being turned into unnecessary problems. And sellers may feel judged, as if the report is making a statement about how they maintained or represented the RV. But in reality, most inspection findings have very little to do with fault at all. They are not accusations. They are not conclusions about who is responsible, and they are not attempts to assign blame. More often, they are simply observations about condition, wear, aging, maintenance, or risk, and understanding that difference is essential. Because once findings are viewed as information instead of accusation, the conversation becomes much easier to manage professionally. Most inspection findings are not evidence that someone did something wrong. More often, they are simply the result of age, use, exposure to weather, vibration, movement, and normal wear over time. And that is especially true with RVs. Because unlike a home or a car, an RV combines multiple systems into one mobile structure. It includes things like residential-style plumbing, automotive components, marine-style electrical systems, lightweight materials, appliances, sealants, roof systems, and moving mechanical parts, all working together in an environment that is constantly exposed to motion, temperature changes, and the elements. And those systems do not all age the same way. Some deteriorate gradually, some wear unevenly, and some are more vulnerable to vibration, moisture, heat, or sunlight than others. So when an inspector documents a condition, that does not automatically mean someone failed. In many cases, it simply means the RV is showing the normal effects of time, use, and complexity. And understanding that helps shift the conversation away from blame and toward what really matters: what the buyer should know, what may need attention, and what level of risk may exist going forward. An RV is a very unusual type of asset. It combines multiple systems that, in most other settings, would never be expected to live and operate together under the same conditions. Most RVs include residential-style plumbing, automotive drivetrains, marine-style electrical systems, lightweight construction materials, and constant vibration and movement. That creates a very unique environment. Unlike a house, an RV is always in motion or built to be. Unlike a vehicle, it also contains appliances, water systems, electrical distribution, roof penetrations, slide mechanisms, and living space components. And all of those systems are exposed to changing temperatures, road vibration, weather, storage conditions, moisture, and repeated use. That kind of complexity naturally creates wear over time. Even well-maintained RVs experience deterioration. Even quality-built units develop aging-related conditions. And even responsible owners can have maintenance-related risks appear simply because of how these systems age, flex, expand, contract, and interact with one another. That is why risk should not automatically be interpreted as failure. It is often not evidence that something was done wrong. More often, it is the natural result of complexity, movement, and time. And that is exactly why professional inspections matter, because they help identify those risks before they become surprises. Professional inspectors are trained to identify things like observable conditions, early indicators of deterioration, safety concerns, installation or modification risks, and areas that may require monitoring or maintenance. That is the core of what a professional inspection is designed to do. It is about evaluating what can be reasonably seen, operated, and documented at the time of the inspection. It is about identifying what a buyer should understand before moving forward, and it is about helping bring clarity to conditions that may otherwise go unnoticed. But notice what is missing from that list. Professional inspectors are not determining who caused the issue, who is responsible, whether someone was negligent, or whether someone failed to do something correctly. Those are very different questions. And in most cases, they fall outside the purpose and scope of a professional RV inspection. Inspectors are not there to investigate blame. They are not there to assign fault. And they are not there to interpret intent. They are there to document what exists. That is a very important difference. Because once inspections are understood as condition documentation instead of fault investigation, the findings become much easier to interpret professionally, and much less likely to be taken personally. One of the easiest ways to understand this concept is by listening to the language. Because the words used in an inspection report or in the conversation around it often reveal whether something is being framed as fault or as risk. Fault-based language tends to sound like, "This is broken. This was done wrong. This should not be this way." That kind of language feels final. It feels accusatory. And it often implies that someone is responsible. Risk-based language sounds very different. It sounds more like, "If this condition remains, it may lead to future problems. This area shows signs of deterioration and should be monitored. This condition may warrant maintenance or further evaluation." Those are not the same kinds of statements. The second type of language is not declaring failure, and it is not assigning blame. It is simply identifying a condition that may matter later. That nuance matters a lot. Because without that nuance, buyers can easily hear concern as catastrophe. Dealerships can hear documentation as criticism, and sellers can hear caution as accusation. But professional inspections are often written in the language of risk, not fault. They are designed to say, here is what is present. Here is what may deserve attention. Here is what the buyer should understand. That is a very different purpose. And when that language is understood properly, inspection findings become much easier to interpret calmly and professionally. A common question buyers ask is, why did the inspector document this if it isn't actively failing? And that is a fair question. The answer is actually very simple. Because early indicators are often much easier and much less expensive to address before they become larger problems. That is one of the key values of a professional inspection. It is not only about identifying what is failing today, it is also about identifying conditions that may deserve attention before they become more serious. For example, sealant may be deteriorating or cracking but not leaking yet. Minor corrosion may not affect function today but could worsen over time. Loose wiring may not cause an immediate malfunction but still deserves attention. None of those examples automatically mean something is broken right now, but all of them may represent conditions a buyer should understand before taking ownership. That is why they are documented. Because professional inspections are not just about active failure, they are also about awareness. And awareness matters. Because once the buyer owns the RV, those small conditions can become future expenses, future maintenance, or future frustration. So documentation is not always a warning of immediate failure. Often, it is simply a way of saying, this may not be urgent today, but it is worth knowing about now. And that kind of awareness helps protect buyers from surprises later. Another reason professional inspectors focus on risk rather than fault is because not all buyers have the same tolerance for risk, and that difference matters more than most people realize. A full-time RVR, for example, may view certain findings as unacceptable because they depend on the RV every day. Reliability, comfort, and consistency are critical. But a weekend camper may look at those same findings and see them as completely manageable. Because their usage is occasional, their expectations are different. Their tolerance is different. One buyer may have the time, budget, and comfort level to handle maintenance, repairs, or ongoing upkeep. Another buyer may not. They may want something more turnkey, something with fewer immediate responsibilities. Neither perspective is wrong. They are simply different. And that is exactly why inspectors do not determine what level of risk is acceptable. That decision does not belong to the inspector. It belongs to the buyer. The inspector's role is to provide clear, objective information about what is present, what may require attention, and what risks may exist. Then the buyer evaluates that information based on their own situation, their experience, their expectations, their budget, and their intended use. That approach preserves two very important things: neutrality, because the inspector is not influencing the decision, and buyer autonomy, because the buyer remains in control of what the findings mean for them. And when that boundary is respected, inspections become far more useful as tools for informed decision-making. Risk often sounds more alarming than it really is, especially when buyers are interpreting information emotionally instead of technically. That is very common, because most buyers are not reading inspection language as inspectors read it. They are reading it through the lens of financial commitment, fear of regret, and the pressure of making a major decision. So when they see a phrase like potential water intrusion risk, it can sound catastrophic. It can immediately trigger thoughts like, is this unit leaking? Is there hidden damage? Am I making a huge mistake? But in many cases, that phrase means something much less dramatic. It may simply mean a condition exists that should be monitored, maintained, or corrected before it becomes worse. That is a very different meaning than active failure. Risk does not automatically mean something is broken, and it does not always mean there is a serious current defect. Often, it simply means this deserves attention. That attention may be preventative, it may be routine, or it may be something the buyer simply needs to understand before taking ownership. And that context matters a lot, because when context is missing, buyers often fill the gap with fear, and fear tends to make conditions sound worse than they actually are. That is why professional communication matters so much, because good communication helps translate risk into understanding instead of anxiety. Here is a simple example. An inspector observes aging roof sealant. That is a very common type of finding on an RV inspection. Now, that same observation can be interpreted in two very different ways depending on the language used. A fault-based interpretation might sound like this: the roof is failing. That statement feels heavy. It sounds final. And to a buyer, it can immediately create fear, because it sounds like the RV has a major active problem. But a risk-based interpretation sounds more like this: sealant deterioration may allow water intrusion if not addressed. That is a very different message. It does not say the roof is currently leaking. It does not say catastrophic damage is already present. And it does not imply that someone did something wrong. It simply explains that a condition exists which may lead to future problems if it is ignored. Same observation, very different message. One creates fear. The other creates preparedness. And that difference matters a lot, because professional inspections are not helpful when they create panic. They are most helpful when they create understanding. And that is exactly what risk-based communication is designed to do. When inspections are understood as risk-based evaluations rather than fault-finding exercises, the entire tone of the conversation begins to change. And that shift is incredibly important, because once findings are no longer interpreted as accusations, they become much easier to discuss calmly and professionally. Instead of sounding like criticism, they begin to function the way they were intended to function, as information. Findings become discussion points instead of accusations. Reports become tools instead of threats. And inspections become part of due diligence instead of obstacles to closing. That is exactly how they are supposed to function, because risk-based communication aligns much more closely with reality. The truth is, no RV is perfect. Every RV will have some level of wear, maintenance need, aging, or condition-related risk. That is normal. What buyers need is not the illusion of perfection. What they deserve is clarity. They deserve to understand what ownership may involve, what may require attention, what may be typical, and what may carry future responsibility. That kind of understanding helps buyers make more informed decisions, and helps everyone involved approach the transaction with more confidence and less defensiveness. And that is exactly why this distinction matters so much. Understanding the difference between risk and fault is essential. It changes how inspection findings are interpreted. It reduces unnecessary tension, and it helps conversations stay professional and constructive. But it is only part of the picture, because even when inspections are written correctly, and even when they are based on risk rather than fault, they can still feel overwhelming, especially to buyers who are seeing this type of report for the first time. Many buyers read an inspection report and immediately feel like something is wrong. Not necessarily because of what the report says, but because of how it is structured, how much information it contains, and how that information is presented. That reaction is very common, and it is often misunderstood. So in the next video, we'll explore why inspection reports often feel far more negative than they are intended to be, how they are structured, and what both buyers and dealerships should understand before reading them. Because once you understand how to read the report properly, the entire experience becomes much clearer and much less intimidating. If this distinction between risk and fault was helpful, you'll find the rest of this series continues to build on that foundation. Subscribe to the channel and follow along as we continue exploring the dynamics of how independent inspections can help smooth RV transactions, and for a more detailed breakdown, these concepts are expanded in the book, What RV Buyers Wish Dealerships Understood About Third-Party Inspections, available on Amazon and directly through the Professional Association of RV Inspectors.